Welcome to the show. You're listening to Angel Nears, the podcast. Angel Nears is a Silicon Valley community for startup builders where founders and operators share their firsthand knowledge on how to build and scale startups. I'm your host, Oleg Kujikov, and our guest today is Trevor Sumner. Trevor is the head of AI and innovation at Radiant. Trevor is also an entrepreneur, advisor, angel investor, and top 100 retail and top 50 retail tech influencer. I'm excited to bring Trevor onto the show to talk about how AI is changing the entire retail industry. So let's get into it. Trevor, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great. Thanks for mentioning all my accolades. You're a good hype man.
I do try. So let's hear what the hype's all about. Can you tell us about your background?
Well, I'm a native New Yorker, and as somebody who has a strong sense of where they've been, I think that's important, especially as like an entrepreneur, because I think as an entrepreneur, you get something thrown at you all the time, like hundreds of things. It's very much like growing up in New York City. And I lived in Austin for a little while, and then I moved back, and everyone was like, well, why? I was like, well, I miss seeing a couple of thousand people every day. I miss walking in traffic and that, energy, that frenetic pace that you see not just in a pedestrian city like New York, but in startups. And I got my computer science degree in 1998 from Princeton, and that was the height of the first internet boom. So I was there for that. And so I spent about 25 years in high tech, high growth companies doing e-commerce and e-business, wireless internet, business process management, internet TV streaming. I've been part of IPOs, large mergers. I started my own company, my first company in 2010, a company called LocalVox, which was a local online marketing platform designed to drive people from online to in-store. Grew that to about 100 people, sold it to the Blackstone Group, and then was looking for the next big thing and discovered Perch, which at the time was a product agency that was doing some basic lift and learn technology and computer vision. And I came on board as CEO to help transform it into a technology company. And we grew that and got acquired by Radiant, which really focuses on digital experiences in location and in the physical world. And so now I head up AI and innovation at Radiant. And so I'm really thinking about how we can use digital to enhance and transform the physical world. I think that's probably one of the greatest challenges of our time. There are people who are really excited about things like VR and being able to climb into our pods and engage natively in digital. What I see is every major study shows that the more that we engage with these fully digital things, the less happy we are, and that the much more inspiring mission is to figure out, to recognize that we are physical beings and figure out how we can use technology to enhance that physical world and our physical experience.
Very interesting. I wanted to ask next, what does a head of AI and innovation / entrepreneur / executive advisor / angel investor do on a daily basis?
Well, it sounds like a bit of ADD, but the real focus, I am the head of AI and innovation at Radiant, and that is the primary thing that I do on a daily basis. And so, yes, there's some startups that I invest in because I've been lucky enough to be successful in some of my ventures in the past, and I advise some of those startups as well. I put out a lot of thought leadership and content, which is where some of those other accolades come from. But really, my goal is to think through. I think the absolute worst way to think of Radiant is as a digital signage company, and I think I say that because most digital signage is terrible. It's like looping interruptive video that is dumb, right? It just loops, and I think the future is like each of these screens is a digital portal that should be aware of its context, be intelligent, and react to the physical world around it, and also provide information that's helpful and contextual. And so when I think about intelligence, what I mean by that is, we have cameras to detect, the traffic walking by, the demographic, age, gender, can target messages based upon that. If you walk up to the screen, it knows you've walked up to the screen, can wake up and kind of start guiding you through a shopping experience. We know if you pick up a product on the shelf, we know we wake up in like Minority Report, know which product you're touching so that we can say, hey, I see that you picked up the Zyrtec, allergy medicine, and you're looking for allergy solutions. Do you want, Benadryl? Do you want Rhinocort for your nose, Visine for your eyes? How do we think about having the context of who the customer is, what products that they're touching, and where they are in the shopper journey? And if you do those things, not only can you provide a better experience for shoppers and for people in these physical locations, but you can also test and measure what works and what doesn't work and constantly improve it. And that's what's been missing. And, it's a pretty exciting time to think about the merging of the best of kind of physical and digital commerce.
And on that, like, why now is this an exciting time? What's driving change in the physical retail industry today?
Yeah, I think it's exciting. There's been, this big focus on e-commerce for a long time because e-commerce grows at a faster percentage rate and, has a lot of data, so you can improve it rapidly. But the reality is physical retail has grown more than e-commerce on a dollar basis every year other than 2020. It's still 85% of sales. So, that should be the focus of where we're looking at optimizing. If you look at a customer that just buys online versus one that buys online and in store, that omni-channel customer who does both spends 7 times as much. They're much more profitable. Their returns are much lower. The brand impact and loyalty is higher. And so, I think we get excited about, the pure digital world, just like VR, right? But the reality is we don't really want to exist in that. I joke around that, a lot of people have been like, imagine this amazing world where we could just stay at home and we could just order things and it could come to our door and we could never leave our house. And then we had COVID and we got exactly that. How was it? It was terrible. It was terrible. It was lifeless. I bought gifts for my nephews and nieces that I never saw, that I never wrapped, that I shipped out on a, with a gift card or with a card that, was written by somebody else and really just a printer. And I just wasn't there for any of it. And it lacked any sense of fulfillment and joy. Right. And so, physical retail gives us a greater sense of connectivity. It's, as I said, 85% of sales. And what's fascinating is, during COVID, we were forced into this e-commerce modality and we've seen a big shift back, right? And so, being the center of profitability, being the center of revenue, being the center of brand and customer loyalty, physical retail actually is now at the precipice to leverage some of these digital technologies, in part because, like, before that, this blending of physical and in store and online, they didn't do it well. But then during COVID, they had to do buy online, pick up in store and other things. So they had to get their house in order. They had to know, here are all the products, exactly where they are in the store. Here's the information about them. Here's how I can route them from in-store to the customer. And so this foundational layer of product and customer were addressed in a major way during the COVID period. And now we can start doing that to improve the in-store experience. And so, I think there's a massive shift going on in the retail market, both to in-store and for retail media generally. And I think it's actually going to change the economics of retail significantly.
Tailwinds, and we all lived through COVID. Interesting to think about how that might have changed the way we do things or the infrastructure in these businesses. All right, let's move to personalization. AI can help retailers offer personalized recommendations and shopping experiences to customers based on their personal preferences and behaviors. Can you discuss some of the challenges that retailers might face when implementing AI for personalization and how to overcome those challenges?
Yeah, there's so many different personalization opportunities. There's collaborative filtering, which is basically a technique where you say people who bought this also tend to buy this, right? So it's a recommendation based upon previous purchase history of others. You can retarget, right? So we've all seen this where you go to a product page and then all of a sudden you see an ad for that product everywhere you go. There's demographic targeting. So you might know I'm a male, 46 years old, and based upon that, you could do targeting. You could look at my purchase history, and based upon that. Now, the challenge is, and the opportunity is that each of those techniques have been siloed. And now AI can basically organize all the different data sets together and make recommendations. That's the combinations of all of them. But, I think, and that's an opportunity for monetization as well, right? So there's this notion of retail media networks, which, is basically advertising as a form of like recommendations, right? So we go to Amazon and you search for, let's say, pet toys or pet treats. And, it used to be here are the top 10 pet treats. Now it's here's 4 ads of people who are vying for that pet treat sale, just like you see on Google. And that retail media is basically a lot of, kind of AI type, bidding and analysis of click-through rates, as well as what the propensity for me as a shopper to connect with those brands may be. And so one of the biggest opportunities is to figure out how do you maximize that growth. And just to give you a sense, retail media has grown to be a $40 billion business. Amazon has quickly become, a major player and advertiser behind Facebook and Google, and, TikTok's private. So they're not, kind of rated in this, and it's growing 25% year over year. And if you're a grocery store, let's say, right, so your margins are somewhere between 2 and 4%. Advertising is an 80% margin business. So if you get just a 4% increase in your revenues from these retail media networks, you're literally doubling your profitability. And so you're seeing huge investments about thinking about how do I personalize the experience in a way that I can influence it and monetize and effectively double the profitability. And it's perfect timing because you've got the death of the cookie. You've got both Google and Apple killing the kind of unique identifier on the mobile phone. And so, Facebook and Google advertising is starting to lose its effectiveness at a time when new types of inventory for retailers that they control, where they get all the margins, is ascending. And so it's a super exciting time.
A lot of money is going into, figuring out how to create these personalized advertising campaigns or just experiences, right? So how can you measure the success of those AI powered personalized shopping experiences, right? How do you know that your AI is doing something and it's not just random chance or your marketing is good to?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you look at them and, the thing about AI is you basically train it with a set of data and then say, here's what a successful outcome is. And then it says, okay, here's a model that when you get a set of inputs, we're going to make a recommendation to get you to whatever that successful outcome is. And so typically people are looking at sales and conversion, potentially loyalty, to bring back a customer if they've been inactive. And then you can measure whether they actually came back, whether they purchased again after inactivity. It could be a cross-sell opportunity, right? So if you buy one thing, a pet treat or a pet toy, can I get you to get another pet thing, right? And so you can measure these success criteria, but you have to be a little bit explicit about it. And I think one of the things that's really interesting to me is that we can do this it's very natural to how we think about this online. But if you ask retailers, what does personalization mean in store? I've done this at a couple conferences. It's great. It's just, very senior leaders talking about personalization. Well, what does personalization mean in store where 85% of your transactions occur? And you see this look of kind of terror on their face because it's like, I don't know. And they may shake their head and say, well, we offer personalization through our sales associates who could walk through the store or something along those lines. And so I think, we're certainly applying AI to eke out some, greater efficiencies in product recommendations, in advertising. But the next big wave is really thinking through how do we leverage these concepts in store? And part of that is, how do you message the client in store? How do you do it in a way that's not creepy, that doesn't know, like, hey, that's Trevor Sumner, pull up his purchase history. Let's give them the right thing. How do we measure this in store where I'm in one aisle, I pick up a product, and then I check out 7.5 minutes later? How do you know that that interaction caused that sale? So there's a lot of challenges to do this in the in-store world, and some really interesting ways that we're thinking about it. And I think the mobile phone helps tie it all together.
Interesting. Very interesting. I'm thinking about my mobile app for Whole Foods when I walk in there, and maybe they could give me a coupon or something. I don't know. But we got a bunch of questions.
That's a great example, right? Every major retailer wants you to download their app, and when you check out, use that loyalty program, right? I scan my Whole Foods barcode. The last 4 times I haven't gotten a discount in my last 4 times, and I'm like, why am I doing this? Well, the answer is like Target's willing to offer you 2% on your purchases if you use their loyalty, and mind you, you're talking about operating margins in that 3 to 5% range. So that's a really big amount. And so the question is, why would you do that? And increasingly, retailers are understanding their role as an intermediary between brands and customers and the ability to sell services. So for example, Instacart, like this retail media concept, Instacart has $1 billion ad business making offers on behalf of brands and their customers to end consumers. And it's going to grow to 1.5 billion this year. That's huge, huge.
Let's talk inventory management. So AI-powered inventory management systems can do a whole bunch, right? They can improve your accuracy, they can reduce waste, and we can optimize like stock levels to be meeting demand, right? If demand is down, we don't need supply to be up. Can you explain how AI-powered inventory management systems use AI to do this, help reduce waste and optimize stock?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And currently we've gone through a supply chain shock that really demonstrates how important these things are and how fragile systems can be. And that, supply chains are not constant, right? And they are very dynamic. And AI makes connections between, various different connections and multiple different dimensions that are very hard for a human to be able to process or a system. So you can look at this on a demand side, right? And so you say, oh, this product hasn't been selling that well. Well, then you look at it and you realize that it's only not selling in stores that didn't have inventory. So, okay, well, it's not really a sales demand problem, it's an inventory problem. You can look at inventory levels and velocity across a broad range of channels and stores, right? And then based upon that, decide how to optimally stock and have a solution well before there is an out of stock problem. Perhaps, let's say you're given a limited allocation of inventory. What's the right optimal way to allocate it? Do you spread it across all your stores? Or do you basically funnel it to the right format stores or the right geographies where the demand is highest to replenish? And so you don't have a ton of supply fulfillment costs, but you've kind of concentrated that to a smaller number of stores, but still turn over the inventory in a reasonable amount of time. So you get all these dials that you can look at to, potentially maximize revenue, make sure that it goes to wherever there's full demand so you don't have discounting, or, just to try and protect your margins. And so there's a lot, AI is really great at this and saying, what is your target success? And then let me give you an answer based upon some dynamic set of conditions going in and say, okay, I've looked at all the different areas and different ways that you're sourcing these sets of products. This product needs to be merchandised next to this product to be successful. If one product is out, then you don't stock the other. Like that level of complexity is very, very difficult for traditional systems and humans to be able to understand. And AI is great at that.
Inventory management system gather data to make informed decisions about stock levels.
Well, this is kind of some of the really kind of interesting stuff is, you can look at traditional systems. Some of the inventory systems have been very, very old and they're being, kind of rewritten as we speak at many places because especially because of the acute levels of pain people experienced during COVID. And so we're starting to see people look at new technologies to look at what's happening at the shelf, right? So some examples are there's a robot at Schnuck supermarkets that goes up and down the aisle and looks at all the shelves and which products are out or in. There's a company called Cooler Group, Coolr Group, that attaches to freezers, right? And takes a look not only of what the inventory is, but also the velocity and how fast the ice cream bars are selling. And because they have advanced visibility into that, Unilever sells 40% more than it did before it had that data because they have this camera on the cooler, right? And so the company that does that is really super interesting because how do you do that on a cooler? You don't want to build new coolers. You basically need like a peel and stick camera that runs on a battery but needs to run for at least a year, right? And we're starting to see people take all these innovative approaches to gather data in new ways. There's a company called Retail Aware in the Midwest, and there are these pushers that you've seen, like when you take a product out, it pushes all the rest of the products forward, and it looks at what the pusher position is to understand what inventory looks like. And so, these IoT or, Internet of Things type networks where devices are sensing what's going on at the shelves are starting to be deployed at mass. Walmart, I'm trying to remember what the number was. I think they process 9 billion signals about this every single day, right, within its store. And you don't see that, right? Like it's all invisible to us, right? And in the background, there's this revolution happening because the intelligence is so valuable that you can sell 40% more by having a clear view of the situation and then having AI and other decision systems alert you to the issues and even provide you the solution.
Interesting stuff, and it kind of connects back with our first topic of like how retail physical locations are going to change. I mean, you're kind of telling me how those locations are already changed and will continue to change in real time.
And this is what intelligence means, right? That intelligence is the shopper experience, right? Providing the right message at the right time, providing access to the content, the ratings, the reviews, the types of content that actually change the way we purchase. But it's also, retail is hard. If you think about what it means to be good at retail, it's so complicated. I don't know if you listen to Professor Scott Galloway he's like, retail is a terrible business because you have to get so many things right just to be even mediocre, right? You've got to figure out the product selection. And you got to know that 12 to 18 months in advance because you got to order it. And then you got to be great at supply chain and shipping it and getting it to in this case, the US. And then once it's at the US, you got to be great at getting it to your distribution centers. And then you got to be great at getting from distribution to your retail. And then you got to be great at getting it from the back of the house to the shelves and making sure people keep it up. And then you got to be great at pricing and making that dynamic. And then you got to be great at the shopper experience and the overall merchandising. And then you got to be great at checkout and sales associates that are trained. You got to be great at all these things. And all of those things can be helped with data, with AI, with visibility. And so, it's an exciting time across the store to apply these new technologies.
AI algorithms can analyze market data and customer behavior to dynamically adjust prices in real time. Can you walk us through the process of maybe how an AI algorithm analyzes market data and customer behavior to make those price adjustments?
Sure. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on. So, as I'm trying to describe, AI can take a broad range of signals about, how to make decisions. For example, here's a cool one. There's a company that has a sensor at the produce aisle and looks at the odor. I guess it's ethylene, I think, about when produce is about to expire and starts, getting to the point where it might start being a little, too old to sell, it detects those chemicals and lowers the prices automatically so that you can sell it through, right? So if you think about like, okay, what signals can I use here, right? You can look at, hey, I'm almost out of this product and I want to get these last two off the shelf so that I can reallocate it to something else. You can look at it's not selling, so let me, try something different, try a dynamic pricing strategy. What are the right pricing strategies? Does 10% off change velocity? Does 20%? Should it be buy one get one free or buy one get 50% off? And AI can test these various things very quickly and very rapidly. And you can see the price elasticity of different products. And so we might find that people are willing to spend a lot more. And, to be honest, if you look at, the fact that even with supply chain challenges, retail is often having record profits. Why is that? They've been able to raise prices and maintain demand. Well, how much can you raise prices? And how much can you raise prices before pissing off your customer and having downstream issues? People like, Target has said they've been committed to keeping the price low. You can argue whether they're doing that or not, but Macy's as an example very clearly was like, we're going to make the most of this. We're going to have very limited inventory and we're going to increase the pricing. And that worked very well for them. They had record profitability. And so AI can help you determine like, what are you trying to optimize here, and look at real time whether that price optimization is driving the outcomes that you want.
Price adjustments, these dynamic price adjustments are fair to both the customer and the business. Is there any fair in this world?
Yeah. So, I guess it's a little bit like the invisible hand, right? And, Adam Smith's invisible hand may end up being, artificial intelligence, right? I kind of like that idea. And I think your AI optimizes for success. So you have to determine success, right? And so if it's revenue or profitability, that may come at the cost of the customer. So you also have to be careful and put on some guardrails like, hey, maybe my max price adjustment is 20% or 10% or whatever it is. And then you routinely have to go back and look at when the algorithms hit the guardrails and say, okay, well, should we have gone above 20% here? Or if not, what's going wrong so that we should retest? There was a study a couple of years back where they were doing dynamic prices on flights, and people who were on Max were quoted higher prices, right? So they could look at, it's very easy, right? Like you could see, I'm Safari or Chrome on a Mac. It's like, great, he must be well off. Let me, jack up the pricing $20 on the airfare. And it worked. It works. Is that fair? Is that ethical? So for me, like, I think that, if you're looking at business decisions about the price of eggs and you're looking at it on a dynamic market basis, that's fine. But if you're targeting me in some way, then it starts like, hey, like you're trying to like, I'm in this adversarial relationship with the retailer. And so should you offer all customers the same price and just base it on market conditions? Now, if you go to a car salesman, they're going to tell you that that's crazy, right? The car dealer would say, no, I'm going to get the max amount for each person, right? And so then, you really got to think these things through also because, when you talk about ethics, there's a variety of ways that these things can go very poorly in terms of the way it targets people by age, by demographic, by ethnicity, by a variety of different things. And so there's a lot of pitfalls, and you got to be very, very careful.
Let's use AI and natural language processing to communicate with customers, answer their questions in real time. Retailers use chatbots to improve the customer service experience and reduce their own costs. How do you measure the success of chatbots in terms of customer satisfaction and cost reduction?
Yeah, I mean, I would push back on chatbots are being used to improve the customer experience. I don't think, when's the last time you were like, man, that was a great chatbot? Like, thanks for that chatbot experience. Like, now, mind you, I often get connected to people in a chat call center, and it's also poor, right? The reality is a lot of this is about automation and cost cutting, and that's fine, right? I get it. It's better to have that than nothing. But we've seen something new come that's really exciting, which is the brave new world with Chat GPT, right? So, yeah, there's this new kind of way of basically building AI models through transformation that allows you to do a much better job of using a large library of good answers and then automating content that actually is pretty relevant. Now, I like what somebody said, and there are a lot of jokes about ChatGPT now, right? Like somebody said, ChatGPT is like an economist. It's always confident and only sometimes right, right? So it can put out good content that's generally right, but not always. And the bar for chatbots is lower than that. So I think ChatGPT is going to be an improvement. So I think that's really exciting. And I think the other part about ChatGPT that traditional chatbots aren't that great at is context within a conversation. So in ChatGPT, a conversation is called a token. It's like a session, right? And so you can ask, let's say, I don't know, like, tell me what are the best dog treats for training a dog? As you can tell, I have a dog, right? And I love my dog to death. So you say, okay, tell me the best dog treats for training. And it gives me a list and says, okay, here's some liver treats, and my dog likes dehydrated lamb, and here's some good ones for your teeth, and da, 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 da. I was like, okay, well, all right, what are the highest rated of the liver treats that you recommend? Okay, only show me the ones with organic ingredients. Okay, well, how many of these can I give a day? And it understands, without me having to repeat everything, the context of our conversation, so can edit responses as we go. And so it's really like a conversational token. And I think that ChatGPT, it's not being talked about enough in both chatbots and also, like, think about Amazon Alexa and Siri, right? I mean, I've had Amazon Alexa for, I don't know, 7, 8 years now, and I use it for the exact same stuff as 7 or 8 years ago, despite Amazon hiring 10,000 engineers. 10,000 engineers that work on that product until the recent layoffs. And I still use it for like reminders and tell me the news and play this and timers, right? And what's the weather? That's it. That's all it's good for, because I can't ask it for the next thing, and it's just kind of stupid. And I spend so much time just it telling me the wrong thing and not being able to say, well, can you update it this way? And I think we're going to see the way, like, this is a recent technology. It's going to be adopted at scale for a lot of these. We're seeing Microsoft obviously making a huge investment there to embed it in Teams, to embed it in chatbots, to embed it even like they have this thing called Copilot. So as you code, it literally starts suggesting, the code to go with it, right? And you can say, write me a for loop that iterates on this and updates this and da, 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 and it'll literally spit out the Python code, right? And so it is a Copilot, right? And I think the chatbots are going to get much more intelligent than what we've seen before.
Obviously, they have a place in digital spaces, but when it comes to physical retail, do these chatbots have a role to play, do you think?
So it's, again, pretty early. And I think in the physical world, one of the challenges we have is, how do you put digital tools in that don't detract from the physical shopping experience, right? So people are like, oh, you should be able to scan every product with your phone and da, 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 as you walk through the store. And I'm like, hold on. So you want me to be walking through the store with my phone in front of me, scanning, and like, can you imagine doing the supermarket and everybody running into each other? Like, it sounds like a mess, right? And it's hard to teach people new behaviors. So we find, if you have to tap a product in an RFID reader, if you have to scan a QR code or download an app, you lose 95% of the shoppers. 95. because it's just too hard to teach new behavior. So you have to make it very native to the experience. Now, there are some people who are starting to experiment in the space. They have Ask Sam, which is basically a chatbot, voice activated chatbot that helps sales associates to find information about products on behalf of clients. Now, like that's like a great training ground, right? Because it's controlled. The sales associates are incentivized to use it. And then you can start leveraging like, oh, these are the types of queries that will be asked. And the sales associates can say good answer, bad answer, and you can train it over time. And then you can start rolling it out. Similarly, CVS has an app for the visual impaired because you kind of want to be able to ask those questions and navigate in other ways. For the near term, though, I don't see chatbots as something that's going to be applied in the physical store experience outside of sales associates. There's a good company also that is doing this with sales associates, and it's basically a chatbot with a little AirPod in their ear kind of thing, where that sales associates can chat kind of like that Ask Sam. I find that to be a much more compelling use case. It's called Theatro, and when the algorithm doesn't know how to answer it, you can just route yourself to a different department. So it's really just a very intelligent way to create super sales associates. And then I think eventually, once we can get Amazon and Siri and Hey Google to start working, then and make that part of our lives, then perhaps we will naturally start using those type of chatbots in store.
AI can help retailers analyze customer data to predict future trends and make data-driven decisions. In these AI conversations, they always come down to data. What's the most important data that retailers need to collect in order to use AI to predict customer behaviors and make those informed decisions?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really hard question. The answer is super nuanced, right? Like you could say, well, obviously, if you're optimizing sales, you need sales data, right? But you also need the data that didn't lead to sales, right? So you need, positive outcomes and negative outcomes. Ultimately, the answer is well-tagged data, right? And that's the hardest part. It's the ability to give AI like a chance to break down the data in all the different dimensions, by zip code, by demographic, by previous purchase history, by which store, by what exposure they had to which promotions, which coupons they had, how long have they been in the mobile app, what products did they click on online before going in store, all that stuff. And it's kind of like, that old adage. It's like, if a butterfly flaps its wings, it'll cause a hurricane in Brazil. Well, like within your data, can AI identify the right butterfly flapping the right wing at the right place and infer that caused the hurricane, right? And if you don't have the classification and the tagging of the data, it's very hard for AI to figure out anything causal and meaningful. And so there are huge businesses that are taking data and trying to figure out, how do I tag it? How do I merge it with other data sources so that I can say this transaction was this person in store who had this purchase history and looked at this. It's the same person who was online and looked at these products, and like, how do I put it all together? And like, again, you're dealing with legacy, old systems that are disparate and siloed, and trying to put a single data infrastructure for this giant AI thing to make decisions at. And the reality is we are very limited in what we can do now because the data just isn't in a place to do a better job. And so people are investing deeply in tagging the data so that it's well structured for these type of algorithms.
Potential risks of relying on this AI to make decisions based on customer data, and what can we do maybe to mitigate some of those risks?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about AI is it's a black box, right? So under these circumstances, I recommend this outcome, this decision to be made, but it doesn't tell you how it got there, right? Again, it's looking at 1,000 different dimensions and weighting it in some proprietary way that it doesn't tell you, right? So it's just a black box how it made that decision. So you have to be very careful, especially if there's bias in your data. I'll give you an example. It's one that people point to a lot. So people were looking at using AI for resume screening in Silicon Valley at a software company. Well, we know Silicon Valley software companies tend to not be the most diverse workforces in the world, right? And so, the AI started making, assumptions that if you had certain types of names, you were likely not to get the job. So it would start filtering out resumes based upon the name of the person, right? And that inherent racism that was in the process. And you're like, and the way they found this out is they just changed the name on the resumes, and that would change the outcome. It's like if I had, a Fred Smith sounding name, the resume would go through. If I had a different name, it wouldn't. And it's like, oh, this is really, really bad. So you could see how this could apply to like product recommendations. So that if you just looked at aggregate purchase data and certain ethnicities tended to buy certain products based upon, you looked at that kind of name as a potential grouping, then all of a sudden you start recommending just ethnic products to those ethnicities. And, if I just have the name, and I start looking at it, I'm like, this is really racist, right? Now, the good news is, one, that in retail, you have actual purchase intent and what drives purchase decisions, and you have real world retail data. And the more data you give AI, the better. So you wouldn't just look at aggregate purchase data, you'd look at my purchase data. And so even if I have, let's say, an ethnic sounding name, you look at my purchase history and you're like, oh, I don't appear to buy those products, and so don't recommend them. But these are the types of black box problems you have to be very afraid of. And so as you look at your, kind of AI algorithms, you have to introduce them. You have to also not just rely on them completely, right? So you can introduce, various different pieces of the model and the AI to, 10% of the time and 20% of the time. And so that you don't have this kind of very obvious to the user, like, hey, you're really taking advantage of the fact that I'm male or female, or, I have a last name that might be associated with an ethnicity or whatever it might be. It has to be much more seamless. And as you start building these things out, you really have to get feedback and look at real use cases where there's a potential for, kind of bias and harm.
You have to look at the results and just sort of get a sanity check for what are the outcomes. But you mentioned guardrails earlier, and is there a way to mitigate those risks before you go out and you have AI make decisions or take an action? Is it always kind of backward looking, and that's the only way we can really make these things better, or is there a way to build the guardrails into it?
Well, let's take the resume as an example, right? So you could say to yourself, hey, by default, you want to give AI everything, right? And let it figure it out, right? Because that's what it's really good at. It's making connections that you would never have anticipated, right, on your own. But maybe you could say, hey, from the resume perspective, I never wanted it to make a decision based on name, so I should take the name out of the resume. And you'd say, okay, you could have that forethought. But then you go down the rabbit hole a little bit and say, okay, well, what if the person went to an HBCU, right? And that would be enough to trigger it, right? Like, these are not the type of colleges we've traditionally successfully hired. And so it's making a bias from that. Now, do you not want to do colleges? It's a little bit of a slippery slope. Like, you don't want to feed it things you don't want to personalize on. But the challenge is it will come and find the biases on its own based upon its training data. And so really thinking about where you're getting to your training data, really deciding what you're going to feed in and not feed in, and being very realistic of like take our computer vision models, right? So, we're very, very good, right? I would argue the best and most accurate in the business at a camera looking at you straight on and saying, here's your demographic within plus or minus 2 years, 3 years of your age, right? However, if the camera's mounted on the ceiling and looking down, At that angle, our models are much less accurate in demographic, as are everybody else. But that's also because we don't have a good amount of training data with that angle. So our models are designed to solve certain problems, and you have to be really cognizant of that as you build your model, as you understand what data you have in there, that your data probably has bias because you got it from this area and not this area. So, like, again, computer vision models, right? Did we look at just the US? Well, what about Asia? What about South America? What about, people look different in different geographies. And how is your model capable of performing in different geographies based upon the amount of data you put in? And the weird thing is, right, if you put it all together, right, actually putting in, like, it's better to have a targeted model. So, like, if you're just doing the US, you actually kind of want a US only model. By putting in a model of South American people as well as US, you make the US targeting actually a little worse, even though it's more comprehensive. Unless you start doing things like tagging US and South America, et cetera, right? So, like, the modeling, the data, thinking through your biases, thinking about where the holes are, thinking about what applications you're good for, what applications you absolutely do not want to use this stuff for, is really difficult, and it's a thoughtful exercise. And so there's all kinds of questions on ethics, on efficacy. It's part art, it's part science, and it's a whole lot of testing. And part of the question is, how do you test before it gets out in the real world, right? And because you want to do a bunch of real world stuff, because you want to test these things in the real world to see what actually happens. So what's your test plan? How do you look for anomalies? How do you think about your guardrails? How do you make sure that your application works the right way? It's thorny. It's a very thorny place to be.
And sounds like there's a lot of jobs like that are going to be new in AI.
Absolutely.
Ethics. Prevent fraudulent activity as well in real time. This improves security for both retailers and customers. How does it do that? How does AI help improve the accuracy of fraud detection compared to, say, traditional methods?
So I think, like, you can look at, when your transactions declined on your credit card, they do a pretty good job of that, right? Like, I recently did some moving and with 1-800-GOT-JUNK, and I gave them my Apple card because they didn't take American Express, and then they were like, we can't process this in an online form, and I was like, really? You're going to make me give a person your credit card? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, okay. The next day I had a fraudulent transaction on the card, the first one. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, two things. One, amazing that the first transaction immediately got detected as fraud. And two, like, just really angry, right? Like, just really, really angry. And I knew better, but that was the only way to get it done. So, like, I just, like, had to get it done. But it was like buying tickets on like SeatGeek or something like that. And it immediately knew. So there's a bunch of AI around that on the fraud detection around transactions. I think that the area that I'm interested in is the physical store, as you can imagine. And I'm seeing a lot of really interesting things around computer vision models to flag people, right? So, like, shoplifting, as an example, is a very nuanced set of behaviors, right? So, like, when people are shopping at the shelf, they're looking at a bunch of different products. They might pick up one thing, put it back, take a look, look at the product, But if you're, like, shoplifting, you kind of, like, maybe you're looking left and looking right? You're kind of doing, it's supposed to looking at the products. You're looking up and down the aisle to see if you're being watched. Yeah, you're casing the joint. You might be, like, hunched over a little and protecting your face. You might, like, grab a product quickly versus, like, in a natural way. You could do, and then, like, all these things you can start detecting. Now, it's very hard to program that, right? Like, hey, if the hand moves quickly, but not too quickly, because you don't want to false, positive a bunch of people and say, hey, we think these people are shoplifting. So there's a lot of good camera data, right? Here are people shoplifting and here are people who are not shoplifting. Let AI figure it out. Like, how important is hunching? I don't know. Let AI figure it out. How important is looking left? Yeah, exactly. The angle of the spine. Like, if I look left once, is that shoplifting? Probably not. Like, how many times? If you look left and right, then left and right, that's definitely shoplifting. Like, I don't know. And the beautiful thing is, AI doesn't even tell us. It just tells us 80% chance this person is shoplifting, right? And so, like, to me, this goes to, like, you know, computer vision is really going to help us understand physical spaces in new ways. We've talked about inventory and understanding what's at the shelf, what products are moving, what are the right messages to the right people at the right time. What actually changes? Like, if I play a message, can I get you to pick up that product over there? Like, I can measure that, right? And so, like, we talk about AI as this general thing. Computer vision is one type of AI. It's the one I'm most excited about because, as we started off this conversation, I think the real frontier and interesting technology challenges are, how do we apply technology to improve the physical world? To do that, we need to understand the physical world. We need to understand how digital affects how we behave in the physical world. And AI and computer vision are underpinning all of that. And it's being applied to all the things that you discussed and many more. And so it's really the most exciting time I think I've been in tech. And as I said, I started in the internet boom when it was all, keg stands and craziness. And they were fun times and IPOs. But in terms of changing the world, like really changing our existence in the physical world, we are at this interesting precipice where technology really is going to be transformational. And so I'm really excited to be kind of at the center of that with AI and computer vision.
All right, let's go find that world and somebody figure out how to do QR codes better. I'm sick of doing QR codes. There's got to be a better way. Before we get out of here, Trevor, thank you. It was a pleasure. What's the best way for our listeners to reach you? And if you have any, asks of the listener, calls to action, that sort of thing, what would you like them to go do?
Yeah, look, I'm pretty active on Twitter at Trevor Sumner. That's TREVORSU, M as in Mars, N as in Neptune, ER. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm friendly. I connect with most people as long as you don't spam me. And then, take a look at what we're doing at Radiant, right? We're really thinking about how to be smart about digital. And that's everything from menu boards that are hooked into the point of sale, that are easy to manage, that can do custom promotions, digital signs that understand demographics and what products you touch, and really thinking through, like, how can you transform physical spaces and experiences with digital technology? That stuff gets me excited. And hey, if you got like a startup idea that's in that wheelhouse of MarTech, AI, computer vision, as I said, I'm an angel investor, I'm an advisor. I'm always looking for, boards where I can add a lot of value and be helpful. So, feel free to reach out, and excited to see the world that we'll build together.
Awesome. All right, Trevor, we're going to end the show there. If you like this episode, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating. Thank you, Trevor, for joining the show. I'm glad you're the one thinking about these complicated applications of AI in the real world, and how our physical spaces are going to transform as we move forward. So thank you. And again, I wasn't kidding. If someone can find a better way to get a QR code on my phone, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care.